Well, if you're joining us live on Facebook, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching from. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Welcome to the Thinking Reimagined Podcast. Let's talk about climate change and equality. I'm joined on this one by Ayomide Olaogun, future Lady Surveyor. Miss Abby, founder and executive director, PATISS, joins us live from London. And Dr. Amma, founder, executive director, Live Abundantly. Hello, ladies. Good
Hello,
afternoon.
Nifemi. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good morning.
Miss Abby, it's morning in London. Good to see you again. All right, welcome, ladies. Call me blessed amongst women, right? This is happening again. I hope that you guys get more men the next episode. All right, so the COP26 UN Climate Summit met with some resistance from youth groups. We talked about the position of Greta Thunberg in the last episode, saying that the talks are a failure. We've also seen thousands descending on Glasgow for protests. However, we have seen many more countries this year pledging to protect nature from the much talked about climate crisis. So as we speak now, over 130 countries covering 90% of the world's forests committed to halt forest loss by 2030. I want to begin with Miss Abby. I asked in the last episode whether global climate talks like this one are really an effective method of, pushing for change and ultimately reducing emissions.
Yes, I do. Good morning. Thank you for that question. Yes, I do think that these talks go a long way in awakening people, informing people, re-energizing the campaign for climate change. I do believe that the talks this year are very, very important because they have been widely publicized. The youth have been, as I said, energized. And it's all over the world. The talks are all over the world. So a couple of weeks ago or last week, obviously the heads of states were being criticized for coming on private jets to the meetings in Glasgow. Everyone's heard. I don't believe there's anyone that hasn't heard of the talks going on climate change. And of course, Greta herself has made her opinions known, regardless of whether she feels they go a long way in creating the change that she wants and a lot of people want. It does go a long way in bringing forth the conversation, letting people realize that there is this situation going on. Even at schools, starting up the talks again, how we talk to children about deforestation, wildfires, the emission of CO2, and so on. So I do think they're a positive way forward.
Let me hear Dr. Amma's opinion out on this one. It appears to change the goalpost every year. It's now 2016, talking about what many nations are looking at in cutting the use of coal. What do you feel about these conversations and how optimistic really are you?
Well, thank you, Nifemi, for that question. And thank you to my fellow panelists. The talk about cutting emissions is very critical, but I actually want to focus on the issue of equality in relation to climate change and recognizing the role that women play and women taking the seat at the table. There was a day that was earmarked about 2 or 3 days ago that really focused on the issues of equality, because we have to recognize the role that women play in the workplace and in the community. The contributions that they make, as well as the fact that women are the major consumers in the world. And when you take that into consideration, it becomes very necessary not only to educate global leaders as well as the youth and children in school on the issues of climate change, but recognizing that there needs to be a power shift. There needs to be an inclusive culture that allows women to take a seat at the table and talk about the effects of climate change on their lives. We have seen through the recent pandemic that many women lost their jobs. Many women were forced to go home and take care of family members, as opposed to being able to continue their employment. We've also seen that if we do not act actively if we do not take active role in this matter, that women will then be re-relegated to the back seat. So it is important that investments be made to include women in areas of employment, in areas of health, in areas of education. It is important to recognize that women are the farmers, particularly in this part of the world. So making sure that access to the tools and the resources that they need in order to perform their work, either on the farm or in the corporate offices, it is necessary for us to have the discussion on equality. You cannot talk about climate change without taking into consideration the Sustainable Development Goals. So I am glad that that topic has come to the forefront and that it is being addressed wholeheartedly. I think we have lost Nifemi.
I'm right here. I'm just soaking it all in, Dr. Amma. Ayomide, I think that what Dr. Amma is talking about is the fact that across societies, the impacts of climate change affect women and men differently. The issue of extreme weather conditions, such as floods, as we know it in Nigeria, have a greater impact on the poor and vulnerable people. And the last check, about 70% of the world's poor are women. I'd like you to talk to us from your vantage position. We've had conversations in the past as regard how unique your field is and how limited the women folk are in the path of surveying in Nigeria. But talk to us very quickly about the experience you have had personally in this regard. Someone did say that empowering women and advancing gender equality can indeed lead to a more environmentally friendly decision making, even at the household and national levels. So Ayomide, talk to us about gender equality, where you are and how you think that this is leading the change for climatic conditions as we currently have it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, thank you for having me. Well, actually, as surveyors and survey students, I feel the climatic change affects us in the general manner it affects the whole population. But then when you decide to relate it to surveying as a profession, it all boils down to our instruments. Like it's different when you take measurements and there is a vast change in temperature or say atmospheric pressure. You have to like apply certain changes, certain corrections to your data, to every data you acquire on the field. But when we decide to bring it back home and talk about how it affects us on a general scale, we talk about how, like Dr. Amma said, we women are major, pardon me please, we take major roles in community development. So, I'm stuck. I'm sorry.
No problem at all. I think I understand that you are taking us first through with how climate change affects or the relevance of what you do as a future surveyor to climate change. But what I was actually asking you was how gender equality is affecting your study as a future surveyor. So I'd like you to be comfortable to share with us the challenges perhaps you are facing, taking your place in that field.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand the question better now. Well, as future lady surveyors, like right now in school, let me take you back to school because that is where I am right now. And in school, let's paint a scenario of practicals and women taking the lead. The guides in every group we have women, and majorly most women are not allowed to take leadership roles in every group work because they feel they cannot perform well enough like the guys would. Because it is said that surveying is a male's course, and well, they say it. It is not what it is. Well, personally, I don't allow that because most of my group works I take leadership positions, and even when people are leaving it to just anybody, I just decide on my own that okay, this is what it is. I have to take this role on my own, and I guess I have answered your question.
Absolutely, Ayomide. Absolutely, I think you did. And I understand. I think I appreciate the fact that you're saying that you are not even creating the room in your mind to accept that this is not a field for ladies. Let me get to Ms. Abby very quickly. I've heard a lot of people say that if you care about the environment, then you should care about gender. You know, I don't want your head to swell right now, but they say women are said to the active agents of conservation and restoration. I like the way Dr. Amma links this perfectly. But what are your thoughts about how this conversation can further, engender inclusion when we look at leadership in Africa? For instance, they say that countries that have women in their parliaments, and this one will amaze you, are more likely to set aside protected land areas and ratify some of these international treaties as it regards to the environment. I don't think we're talking a lot about this at all.
Thank you for that, Nifemi. I've been dying to make my contribution about Mother Earth. So as you may know, I teach quite a lot, and I tend to personify things. So if I personify the Earth, our planet, I personify the Earth as a woman, So if we talk about Mother Earth, being a female, nurturing and feeding and encouraging the Earth to grow and to be plentiful and to be sustainable, right? We're thinking also about the role women play on our planet. Women can come together, in this respect and push forward more than they have in the past. I say this because if we, even on the grassroots level, when we're thinking about women doing women's work being farming, maybe, of course, men farm as well, teaching, and even in other professions, women's work is considered maybe nursing and so on. So we're in a prime position to actually educate, not just educate the children that surround us, but educate everybody. So as a female, representative of Mother Earth, I feel it's actually our major concern. And it is our role to do this, to educate. There was a video that I saw online with the children. I think they were chanting the national anthem or the pledge, almost knee deep in water. And really, my heart sank because you wouldn't want to experience that yourself. You don't want the children to experience this. And this is all happening to Mother Earth. So, but the reality is, it's a catch-22, the need for the children to be educated, but, in these terrible circumstances. So as responsible guardians of the earth, I would say that this is an opportunity for women to get together, set a new agenda, set different agendas, bring forward our strength in the area of equality, and really, go to the grassroots as well to educate. I don't think we should leave the conversation to, the business enterprises and the large multinationals alone. I think a lot of work can be done in the grassroots as well.
I would like to add something to that statement. I don't distinguish work as male versus female. I think that work is work, and women and men can take on roles of leadership. Women and men can be farmers. Women and men can be surveyors. Women and men can be CEOs or C-suite persons, or be active members of the community. And women can be presidents and prime ministers. We've seen that occur, although there are very few that have reached that pinnacle on the African continent. I believe that diversity and inclusivity and equity is critical when we're speaking about the issues of climate or any other issue, really. And women represent 50% of this world. And even in the workplace, there's an imbalance. But if you try to balance it up globally, we have to recognize the important role that women play. And that role also necessitates the importance of equity and equality on all platforms. So there are policies in place, but if we do not implement those policies, if we do not stand fast about those policies being implemented fully, then we will continue to have this disparity that we see in terms of access to work, in terms of access to resources, in terms of access to education or health, or any of the other issues that we talk about. I am most concerned, like Miss Abby stated, about Mother Earth. And I tend to describe it, and I think most people, except sometimes people say the fatherland, but it is the motherland. It is the land, it is that gives rise to everything. So it is the motherland, it is the Mother Earth, it's Mother Nature. Those are the words that we use to describe nature because of what it gives and what it makes possible. So ensuring that we respect Mother Earth is very important. And I do believe, as Miss Abby stated earlier, that we need to start really in primary school. We need to start educating our children to recognize the importance of nurturing and respecting Mother Earth, but also the adverse effects of climate change. There is absolutely no surprise the number of activists that we have, or environmental activists, and many of them are female. It's not a coincidence. I don't think so. But the work that they do, the work that we're all doing, really must be supported by everyone. And that includes the male as well. So males should support women in the work that they do. And the need for mentoring and supporting and sponsoring women in the workplaces or in the community is absolutely critical, so that they can be decision makers and they can participate in the process. Thank you.
I wanted to add something that when I did say women's work, I said this is what it's expected. I mean, we are trying so hard to get more men to be teachers. We're trying to get more men to be nurses. We're trying to get more women to be police women, you know. So I wanted to go back and explain something else, that usually women are given the task of homemaking, and naturally they're able to multitask, and naturally they're able to recycle. I wanted to bring this in. They're able to recycle, they're able to stretch their budgets, stretch whatever they're given in so many different ways. So naturally, I think it's instinctive. And this is where we need to take the initiative. And we have started taking the initiative. The lady using the tires to recycle tires to make furniture. The other lady using recycled bottles and bags to make different things as well. I think it's a natural instinct, and we have to carry the men along. We have to explain, and we have to work together. This is an area where I actually think we champion, because we don't know how we manage to do it, but we manage to do it. You see, there's so many children that don't even have enough to eat, you see, and unbelievably or not, they manage to get fed. Whether by compromise, whether by, miracle, whichever way it is. We're given a huge responsibility. And I think this is the time for us to work together. And as Dr. Amma said, many, many advocates of climate change, the change makers in this area are women. And there's probably a reason why. Thank you.
The two things I would like to respond to. First of all, we don't multitask. We we shift our attention. Women are able to use their attention or shift their attention. But the idea of multitasking is actually a myth. It's a fallacy. Only about 1% of the entire world population can actually multitask. But what we do is we shift our attention. So women are able to shift their attention during the process of doing different things. But the idea or the concept of multitasking is actually it's a myth. Only 1% of the world can do that. The other thing you stated, Ms. Abby, is that we have to carry the men along. It's a brilliant idea, and I hope that it happens. But how many men have really carried the women along? And the men, as we see every time we go onto a world stage, it's the men that are showing up. It's the men that are the global leaders. Only 49 of the global leaders are women. It is appalling. But even then, when you see them speaking, it's mostly the men. So let's encourage the men to carry the women along, because the women are always carrying the men along. It's time for the men to take a role at carrying the women along.
Let's
I
talk
know
about.
Nifemi has something to say about that, don't you, Nifemi? Or are you going to brush that one over?
Yes, I will take you up on fatherland or motherland later, Dr. Amma. But let's talk about the role education has to play in all of this. Ayomide, I would just like you to tell us if there's a lot happening in your school, in your curriculum about climate change, if you are being taught about the global warming, fossil fuel emissions. I'd like to know if it is part of your curriculum, because the conversations we're having right now has a lot to do with how much information is at our fingertips, and perhaps you can just enlighten us if that is priority currently in your institution.
Well, the direct answer to that is no. But the thing is, even here in school, we are advised to make researches on our own and learn more. We cannot learn everything in school, and our lecturers cannot teach us everything. In fact, I'm very sure not all lecturers are aware of what's going on right now. And so we are always advised to go on our own, make researches, be enlightened outside. So that's.
I'm wondering, Miss Abby, who's to blame here? Because the last time we talked about this, they did say that developing countries may not necessarily be making any significant contribution to global warming, but they are at the receiving end. And there's a lot of money also that they've talked about during this COPs meeting year in, year out, to be given to developing countries, which perhaps was going to help in all of this. Is it a function of, global priority, or perhaps Nigeria is yet to tap into this current global warming reality?
I think it's a combination of factors, actually. I think there are many factors at play. The reality is the average man in Nigeria or woman in Nigeria is trying to make ends meet, is trying to survive. I really don't think climate change is the first thing on their mind. They're trying to get electricity in their homes, water running in their taps, food on the tables. They're trying to keep their jobs. They're trying to educate their children. I think it's actually on if on their list at all, of thoughts for the day. Unlike in the West, where everything seems to work smoothly. So we can talk in schools about, the recycling bin. We can talk in schools about explaining to children not to keep the tap running whilst they're brushing their teeth. The reality is, for an average Nigerian, you don't keep the tap running when you're brushing your teeth. You put the water in a cup and then you do your rinses. So the reality is Nigeria, if I speak for Nigeria, I can't speak for Africa as a whole, it isn't a top priority in the education system, because we're thinking about a lack of resources even to teach the basic, subjects, maths, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and reading, writing, arithmetic. So from that perspective, it's not something that would be in the curriculum, because there are other more pending topics and issues to teach. So for example, history, which isn't being taught at all, is a problem, because in order to understand the climate change, you have to look at the history. Why have we arrived where we are? We've arrived here because of overpopulation, all sorts of things, mismanagement of our planet. And so the mismanagement of our planet. So, but I do think in a city like Lagos, where we're quite fast paced and quite forward looking, we do need to teach these subjects in the curriculum, this situation in a curriculum, because I know that a lot of children will know in Lagos where Bar Beach is, they'll know where Badagry is, they'll know where all these places are, and they'll know the impact on the beaches of climate change. For example, in Bar Beach, I believe, there's been so much pushback, so much sand filling that there isn't a beach there anymore, if I'm correct. So they would yes, they would have to be taught implicitly anyway, even if it's not explicitly about what's going on.
But Miss Abby, is it any different in the UK where you are, particularly for younger children? Do they introduce studies about the environment very early where you are?
They do. I mean, from birth, children are taught this is the recycling bin and this is the normal bin. That's the first thing. So you don't put cartons and bottles and cans in the normal bin. They know that there are two big bins outside. They know when they come to take the garbage, and children are fascinated with wheels, fire trucks, ambulances, anything that has flashing lights, and the garbage truck has flashing lights. So most babies actually know that that's the garbage truck, and there's one for the recycling bin and there's one for the normal bin. So from that basic concept of recycling, we're teaching them, we can use this again, or this can be used by somebody else again. So, and then going on, we have to teach them about keeping the taps running, not to keep the taps running when they're brushing their teeth, because it's a waste of water. Then obviously in school, they're taught about the pipes and the collection bins of the water, the rainwater, and they're taught so many things, how to plant using the rainwater. It's part of the curriculum, actually. It's the responsibility of the school to teach. And also as parents, in Canada, you're actually fined if you don't use your recycling bin. You're fined by the government because they've given you 2 bins. Why aren't you putting anything in the recycling bin? So, of course, this is the Western world. So it's a different thing altogether, but it is part of the curriculum.
But Dr. Amma,
I need to add something. Can I clarify something? We're using the term the Western world, and I think we should use the term developing versus developed. That might be a better term, because when you start saying the Western world, and what's the Eastern world and what's the Southern and Northern world? So we really need to use terms that are politically correct and more in tune. So developing and developed world. But before we move on to your next question, I do want to say this. Climate change is occurring here in Nigeria and actually throughout the world. And we need to recognize that many of the practices that we have now in Nigeria, deforestation is going to affect us greatly in the long run. That is part of the issues we're dealing with climate change. Throwing the rubbish on the road, it is appalling when people finish drinking something and they just drop it on the ground and they move on. All of that is not only clogging the drainage and leading to flooding, but it's also waste that's not biodegradable. And if you can pick it up and recycle, it will make a great difference. Let's talk about the toileting in Nigeria. The fact that people are defecating in rivers, into streams, into the ocean, it's appalling. And that also affects climate change. Talk about the use of charcoal or just burning wood. That also is adding to greenhouse gases and the emissions. So there's so many things that are going on right now in Nigeria that are not being addressed, and in the long run are going to affect how we live in this society. And we're in a global village. So what happens here affects everybody else. You can drive to Badagry, you can drive to Ghana, and you will see rubbish that's come from Nigeria floating in their oceans. It moves. We're not in a stagnant world. We're all connected. And in that case, we must be responsible, and that responsibility starts at home, and it's also part of the educational system. I do want to say Ayomide, who is here, is part of the Live Abundantly Equality and Equity Scholarship Program. When I brought up this subject about 2 weeks ago about COP26, I was absolutely astounded that none of the 6 recipients knew anything about climate change or anything about COP26. And we're in the process of enlightening them and educating them and encouraging them to go out of that bubble of school and lectures to realize that there are other topics that are going on that are going to affect their work in the long run. So it does need to be part of the educational system, and it also needs to be topics that we're discussing on a regular basis.
I agree with you, Dr. Amma. Ayomide, I'm sure you're inspired. Perhaps you return to school now, being a change agent yourself as regards the environment. But Ms. Abby, I don't want to agree completely that we don't teach these things in school. Many of the things you talk about, my little girl returns from school to mention them at some point. Perhaps we just threw them away up the ladder. But what other ways do you think? I'm taking us back to the issue of equality now. What other ways do you think promoting gender equality can strengthen this issue of climate change?
Thank you, Nifemi. I was speaking for the government schools, Nifemi, in terms of the education, because I do believe that private schools, because you're paying good money, should educate your children on climate change. So I think I was speaking broadly in terms of the state schools, the children who are, almost knee deep in water, that sort of situation where they living and surviving is the key priority rather than climate change. Going back, I still stand firm on my beliefs, actually in my belief, that women have a great role to play, in this. And again, using the word opportunity. Okay, so yes, we've spoken about this in several podcasts previously about, the head of the home and all these things, but in terms of running the ship, I believe women naturally recycle, whether it's clothing, whether it's food, whether it's, turning a dress that is too small for a child into a shirt, those sort of things, I wouldn't, in case I don't want to incur the wrath of Dr. Amma by saying this is an inbuilt gift of a woman, but really, when it comes to setting the tone now of climate change, it is time for the women who are doing this wonderful work in recycling, for example, to come forward. It's time for women to speak, because this is important to us and to our children, okay? Not saying it's not important for the men as well, but generally men tend to do rather than to speak. So if we're looking for changes, we do have to appoint more women in more leadership roles globally, in order to speak and carry forth, the changes we need.
There's no doubt at all, Ms. Abby, there's a growing body of evidence showing that women are generally more vulnerable to the negative impacts of climate change than their male counterparts. And even if Dr. Ahmed doesn't believe it is inborn, perhaps it is a trait that has developed over the years, given their experiences. I mentioned earlier that the issue of climate change appears to affect majority of the poor, 70% of them being women. If you look at the data in developing countries. Now, there's a new research published in Nature Communications showing that empowering women through improved healthcare, education, even representation in government could help societies adapt more quickly and easily to impacts of a changing climate. Dr. Ahmad did mention earlier that conversation in this regard held during the COP26. I think it began sometime in 2015 in Paris. But I'd like us to answer the question whether women are also more involved in, all of these conversations back here in Nigeria. We now know that it's important that we ensure an equal space, and resources for both women and men to participate in climate change decision making and action at all levels. But Tama, do you think that is the case here in Nigeria?
Well, I want to make sure that I am understanding your question. Are you stating or asking if there's equal representation of women? Is that your statement?
Yes.
You're
I'm
asking if I think you know
Yes,
the
I'm
answer to
asking.
that question, Nifemi. Do you think that there's equal representation of women? How many
Well,
women are
if I'm looking
how
at
many
it from
women are
the prism,
I'm so sorry, repeat that.
if I'm looking at it from the prism of Thinking Reimagined, I've spoken only to women on this issue. So my thoughts and judgment is beclouded right now.
Well, it shouldn't be, Nifemi, because I think you know the answer to that question. Women are not represented. There's a misrepresentation of women. There's tokenism given to the representation of women at the table. I mean, when I think about, and I don't like to, home in on just Nigeria because we are a global platform and we're speaking on a global platform. But since you are specifically about Nigeria, it is my understanding that the top level people that accompanied the president, the Buhari, to COP26, that there was only one woman. Any reason why? If 50% of this population is made up of women, why is it just one senior member of the government that accompanied him that was a female? I mean, if you really want to talk about equality and climate change and recognizing that 50% of your population are women and recognizing that women play a pivotal role in climate change, well, they should play more role in government, but they're in the workforce and all of that, shouldn't you have better representation? It's the same scenario we had with the pandemic. We had a pandemic and it was just men sitting at the table and making rules and regulations without considering that there are women in the workforce. And it's those same women who were forced to leave their jobs globally, not just here, globally. It is the women who left their jobs to take care of the household, to take care of the elderly. Why is it that the men did not take on that role? I mean, I do recall somebody saying common sense roles. A few recordings ago, yeah, some of this is common sense roles. And if that's the case, then everybody needs to recognize that when you're making decisions, when you're making policies, you should include women and ask them, what is necessary for you to remain a viable part of this conversation, of this process? It's not being done. So, Nifemi, before you even posed the question, you knew the answer to the question. And the reason why you've had more women coming on here, it's not because men were not invited to be part of these conversations. Many of the men that we invited simply said, I don't know anything about climate change. I can't speak about climate change. Why not? If you're an educated male and you're walking the streets and you're earning a salary or you're in school, I promise you, you can have a word about climate change. It's not a women's conversation. It is the people's conversation.
All right. Ayomide, let's talk about the 2030 SDGs. The Goal 13 talks about climate change. It specifically talks to the need to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. I think from the last conversation we had, not much of that has been done in the school where you are, but I want to turn your attention to target 13.3 that talks about improving education, awareness raising, and human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning. Is that a challenge you're considering taking, returning to school and, perhaps reading up on these issues and, just raising some form of awareness on global warming?
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't believe that would be an easy one.
How do you mean?
Okay. First and foremost, okay, it's something that can be done. Like, we can start from the department level where we have just 100 students and okay, a few hundred students. So, okay, it can be done. It can be done.
I
Actually, I
think the
can.
first place to start is just being a little bit more inquisitive on these issues, reading up on them, identifying what the challenges are, and then perhaps you can just pick one or two things that can inspire you. And then you have a lot of resources to pick from, even from here. We also spoke to some two female environmentalists on the episode the last time who can also guide you through. I think it's something you should think about.
Yeah.
Miss Abby, we're wrapping up now. Let's talk about how we can improve education in this light, particularly how women can be more involved, because data seems to say that whatever women touch now turns gold. And if we can get them to be passionate about this, then we can reach more people.
What are you guys doing? What is this same thing?
Ayomide, can you mute yourself? Okay. So I want to address the education part of the question first. So in terms of education, I know that over the years, I've encouraged schools like I did to set up a green society, just like we have art society, or you have, the science, extracurricular activity groups in science or in art or in music, just to start up a green society where children come together and they pick a topic each week, whether it's deforestation, whether it's recycling, whether it's wildfires, whatever it is, they pick a topic and they call their little organization the Green Society. It doesn't have to be led by a teacher per se, but it can be overseen by a teacher. So in terms of Ayomide starting up something at school, you could call it the Green Society, the Environmental Society. Just get a few of your friends together, start looking into different topics, that concern Mother Nature, Mother Earth, and you start from there. At home, I do believe that it's high time that we don't let the men go scot-free with not answering to the damage they also cause on our planet. I believe that we're all part of the ecosystem, and we all have to reserve and preserve the ecosystem. So I think, I've said it over and over again that women can speak about climate change very, very clearly, very, very easily. But I do think that because there's so many gaps, there's so many gaps in leadership when it comes to climate change, it's a position that could be well filled. My mind goes to even the catering, in the catering industry, where it's so important to talk to them about, what they use to cook. It's so important that women speak up, especially the women that are in the know, to guide the other women, because I'm sure if they realize what the statistics are, they will also be shocked. I mean, Greta is very good at saying that this planet will be no more in X number of years. She's very good at explaining that, look, the zebras will be extinct, even monkeys will be extinct. Sooner or later, we'll have no more dogs or cats. In fact, we'll have no more meat to eat. The reality is that some university students here are now campaigning against the consumption of meat because they believe that the rearing of meat is so fuel intensive, so fuel intensive that we shouldn't consume meat anymore. So if we go through the statistics and we educate people on the statistics, actually as boldly as Greta has done, I think it'll become more of a reality as well. And if we think back, I think back of when I was much younger and there were antelopes in Bagada. I'd go and see my aunties and there were antelopes in Bagada as pets, like dogs were. It wasn't a rare thing to see. I don't know, Ayomide, have you seen an antelope before? Okay. Or a tortoise? Have you seen a tortoise before?
Yes, it is.
So it's not so bad then. But the reality is it's a given fact that if we don't do what we need to do, our children will not see, our children's children's children, the future generations will think of dogs as dinosaurs, so to speak. We'll think of, all these animals as dinosaurs. So we need to carry everyone forward together.
Absolutely. Ms. Abby. Dr. Amma, we saw our own President Muhammadu Buhari at the conference of the parties talking about Nigeria's commitment to net zero carbon emission by 2060, but is advocating gas as the transition fuel between now and then. The challenge with gas is that it's become very expensive for many average Nigerians, and that might drive them immediately back to coal and even wood. So it means that get ready to lose some more trees in the forest if the price of gas keeps going on. It's been increased for up to 50% now in the past 6 months, and we're hearing that the figures might even go higher as we count down to Christmas. So what are your final thoughts on this one, particularly as it regards what Nigerians can do irrespective of their realities?
Nifemi, here are my thoughts. We need to rethink how we live, how we do things, how we connect with our environment, whether it's people, whether it's the trees, whether it's the animals. We really need to rethink all of this. We also need to repurpose how we do things and how we interrelate, because I find that until we repurpose our businesses, our educational structure, and the like, we're not going to advance into a place where we're at an equitable level with the international world or even amongst ourselves. So that is going to be critical. And I also think we need to retool our lives. I mean, when you think about all of the tools that we have, that we use to exist and to interact and do the work we have. And when I speak of work, going to school for me is work, because we're teaching children and preparing children for the workforce in the long run. So that also needs to be in better alignment. If we do not take care of ourselves and our environment, as Miss Abby said, some of the things that we have taken for granted will be extinct in no time. And our children will struggle with health issues, with food security issues, with poverty, and the likes. So it is very critical that as a people, whether individually, collectively, in small groups. And I thank you for encouraging Ayomide to go back to her school and start to do things with her schoolmates, because her age group really holds the key to the future. And they need to take this seriously. How is climate change going to affect their lives, whether it's in the workforce or at home? It's very critical, and we must collectively come together to make it more sustainable world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Ayomide Olaogun, future Lady Surveyor, Ms. Abby, founder executive director, PATISS, Dr. Amma, executive director, Live Abundantly. Thank you so much for your contribution on this one. One thing is sure, our world is getting warmer because of fossil fuel emissions by humans, and something has to be done urgently. Our ice caps are melting, the sea levels are rising, there is flooding in some parts of our country. Farmers' herders clashes is getting more terrible by the day, and we can all point fingers to climate change. We'll almost rise up now and do something about it. I'm Nifemi Oguntoye. Join us again, and we'll be back with lots more for you. Bye.